Otherwise, we can use this random protocol that we were made aware of the other day, and see if it works though.
Chairs can help, of course, but we need at least one dedicated person.
There was a draft about co-operability, but I think it expired long ago.
Yeah.
If we don't have volunteers, then I would like to ask Michael to give me a number from 1 to 42. Well, actually 1 to 40.
Just volunteered.
No, you need to increase the gain a bit.
Because I'm too quiet. Because I'm too quiet.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Much better now.
All right.
So would you like Michael to be the innocent hand that gives me a number so that I can randomly select an individual to take minutes, if that individual is so kind? Michael? No?
I can't figure out not to give myself the number, right? First.
Okay, not so innocent hand anymore. Marco, now you give me the number, Marco.
Yes, it's IETF109, so 10 plus 9, 19.
19, okay, let's see. Let's see, people are logging in and logging out just to skip this. 1, 2, 3.
I'll take minutes.
Thank you.
I already said that. Like, obviously my mic's not working.
Thank you, Michael.
And believe it or not, I think 19 is Joran. Joran Selander, you have been chosen. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, we are volunteering you. Yes, you have been. You have won the privilege to take minutes on this session together with Michael. You could be so kind. Yes, thank you so much.
How do I do to collect the prize?
You just go to the URL that the Jabber scribe will post in Jabber in a minute, and just take notes there in the CoreMD.
Oh,
and of course we can help you with that. Yes, yep. You're welcome. We will keep doing this in the future. I think it works. So let's start
for Shmoo, actually. It can be a draft for Shmoo.
Yeah.
It can be a draft for the Shmoo working group.
Yeah, it could. So I think we have a sufficient amount of people, and we have 3 minutes past. So let's start. So welcome to Core. Marco and I will be the chairs for you today. As usual, you can chat on the Jabber and comment on the Jabber and on the Miteco chat, which is the same thing today. We assume people have read the drafts that are going to be discussed. And as usual, the IPR applies for all the communications in the IETF. Then the IPR principles or guidelines. Blue sheets are automatic. Note takers, we already have Michael and Joran, and the chairs will be helping. Please remember that note well applies to this session as well. And yeah, I mean, you know how the Jabber works and that the meeting is recorded. So for the Friday session, we have I think a bit of a shift. We will have the ad hoc presentation first because it was postponed from the last meeting, and we have a bit of a short update on some of the drafts that maybe Marco you can give the update.
Sure. All happened yesterday, actually. Stateless was approved for publication by the ISG. Some quick check from Ayana, approved, enter the editor queue. So that's great, thanks to the authors and working group. And also 2 other drafts are now in last call, so the VRN request tag. So they should also proceed, well, hopefully in the coming weeks.
Great. And hopefully after this session, we'll have 1 or 2 more. So let's start already with the echo request. Just a second. Unless I've noticed that there is some issues sometimes with the quality of the call. We all have the video. So I guess if we are not presenting or the chairs also, we can cut the video. So Francesca, you are in.
Yes. Hi, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Great. So, yeah, thank you for putting me up first. So this is about combining EDOC and OSCORE. I presented this document. This is the second revision, so version 01. Next slide, please. If you remember from last IETF, where I presented this, the goal of this document is to combine EDOC message 3 and the OSCORE subsequent of OSCORE request. So in this figure, you can see EDOC and OSCORE are run sequentially. And then in the next one, next slide, please, they are combined. So to do so, as I introduced last time, there were several different options. Next slide, please. And so at the last IETF meeting, we had used the options only. So we got a feedback from the working group that the working group preferred to send EDOC in an OSCORE message, and not to send OSCORE in an EDOC message. So each of OSCORE and EDOC define how to send an OSCORE or EDOC message over co-op. And we went with send EDOC in OSCORE, and even then we still have two possible options on how to do that. So either signaling this with a new co-op option, or signaling in the OSCORE option itself and use a bit in the OSCORE flag byte. Next slide, please. So just to remind you what these two options would look like. If OSCORE, if EDOC was signaled in a new EDOC option, you can see here, this is a co-op message, both figure actually. And EDOC message 3, the data, and the ciphertext are in the payload. So they are sequenced in the payload. And the second option, next slide, is to take a bit in the OSCORE option itself. So these were the two possibilities. And next slide, please. And in the current version of the draft, we actually have written down examples and of co-op messages based on the two appendices in OSCORE and EDOC test vectors. And we have calculated what's the actual difference between these two options. And the difference is 1 byte. We got 58 bytes in total for the co-op message when the signaling is done with an empty option, and 57 bytes in total, but only because we are using a bit in the OSCORE flag byte that doesn't need to expand the flag byte. So as you know, we only have 8 bits in the flag byte, and we're using the last one to signal OSCORE plus EDOC in this message. But if we didn't want to use that, then we would need to expand the flag byte of 8 more bits, and so there would be no difference in size in these two options. So next slide, please. So on our way forward, we still have as a goal to choose one of the alternatives. We would like to get feedback and reviews from from anybody. and hopefully then adopt this work and standardize it. And it would be a very, very simple document once we have chosen. So John is saying in the chat that we should probably not use the last flag bit. Better to save that for other stuff that is sent in every message, and I agree. So basically the difference in size between these two options is 0. Yeah, thank you for, yeah, that's good. We can put these 2 slides. And the difference is just that we have to register either 1 bit in the flag byte registry, IANA registry, or we have to register a new co-op option. That's the difference. So does anybody have an opinion about that? Okay, so I see Carsten questions in the chat. Yes. So Carsten, if will the new option really be 1 byte? Well, the option is empty, so and it will come after the score. So yes.
Yeah, Christian just gave the number, so the data has to be less than 13, and we would have to check. But since it's following the OSCORE option, we know from which number the data is going to be computed.
So yeah, and I also made sure to take a number that is correct, or yeah, that is free, and it's all like critical. All that I calculated it the first available number, and it was 1 byte. It was, yeah, the delta was less than 13.
Just a reminder, please, guys, try to avoid the chat if you can actually just use the microphone. So we have the queue, we can start using that.
Yeah, except if somebody else is already using the microphone, then I fall back to the chat.
Okay, and John was in the queue as well, I think.
You don't get to see the chat.
Yeah. Are there any new known benefit disadvantages with the 2 options? I don't know. I could think if you use a new option, you might run into problem if in the future there is some second option that also want to add things and concatenate it with OSCORE. Then if you use both options, then you might run into problems. So from that perspective, it seems maybe a little bit better to register a new bit in OSCORE, but I don't have a strong preference.
Christian?
So anything that prescribes some pre-processing of the payload before getting passed on to, before becoming the message that would be there if that option were not present, will need to solve its sequencing issues. That's independent on whether it's inside the ad hoc option or a new option at all. Sorry, inside the OSCORE option or a new option at all.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that we need to fix that anyway in either case, which makes sense. Yes.
Matt had also another valid comment. Matt, can you mention it also for the minutes later on? If not, I can also relay from him. Basically, the Diana, he would prefer anything on the Diana registry so that other alliances can reuse it. So I'm assuming that then he prefers option 1 instead of 2. So
both options have a IANA registration. In one case, it's an IANA registration of co-op new option, and in the second case, which is on the right now, it's there is a IANA registry for the OSCORE flag bits. So also
okay.
be, yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So really, what we're looking for is opinions at this point on what do you think is best, and if anybody wants to implement, or that's obviously the best way to give feedback is, oh, I implemented this way and it really didn't work. So, but I personally I personally cannot see a big difference between these two options. Yara, do you want to say something?
Yes, do we have Stefan Ristisov on the call? I haven't seen him because I think he actually he planned to implement this. But so we should ask him what's the status, since he's not present in this meeting.
Mm-hmm. And Carsten, when you say let's grab that number, do you mean?
Yeah, so we should be. I think there are good reasons to turn this into a co-op option, and given that there are only a few spots after 9 that are 1 byte, I think we should grab that number and go ahead with it.
Yeah, maybe we could do a temporary registration. I don't know if that's the name, but
yes, I don't remember what the IENA considerations are.
okay, but I'll check that out. And
We might be able to just register it.
I talked about that with Ayana just the day before, and it's an early allocation can basically be done by the work through the working group chairs if there is consensus in the working group that this will be used in a late that this document is going somewhere.
Yes, but early allocation only works for things that require ISG action in some form. So what were the IENA considerations for option numbers? Can anyone remind me?
It's
Just a second, let me interrupt here because we are already 17 and I don't want to do too much on this topic right now. I think, Francesca, you got the feedback you wanted and everybody seems to be leaning towards the ad hoc. Can we do the rest offline? Is that okay? So that we can continue with the core session?
Sure.
yes. So just to summarize, I'm hearing that people are agreeing with going towards the new ad hoc option. And then there is, at least in the room, from what I've heard, there is no disagreement about that. And hopefully we can do the early allocation. So that would be, I will come back to the chairs about that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's move on to the first item of today, actually, which is CML versions.
So, features and versions.
I don't know, we don't see the video yet. Now it's loading. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so the first one is a really quick one. Next slide. So we have been discussing this draft at the last IETF, and I just copied the headings of the slides there because I'm not going to show them again. So CNML uses a version number. That version number starts at 10, and the objective of a version number is, of course, to do extensibility, but version numbers are stupid for extensibility. So the proposal is to interpret the version number as bits, and turns out since the number needs to be represented in JSON, essentially we have 53 bits, shades of ATM, and it looks like we can get by with those 53 bits. So that's the existing draft. Next slide. And at this IETF, well, at the last IETF, we said we needed more reviews, and we identified 2 people who will be doing reviews. Hello, Bill. Hello, Jaime. And Dash 01 was submitted recently. There are just minor edits there with an updated reference, so it's essentially still the same document. So it would really be great to get some reviews, and also it would be great to get some implementations Ari considered implementing it before the meeting. I don't know, Ari, did you get around to that?
It's implemented. Seems to be working.
Okay. So it's not a very complex document. So people who are working with Cinemat probably should have a quick look. Matthew.
Carsten, one of the comments you made that versions and version IDs are stupid, and I deeply resent that, and I don't think you're fully thinking through this as an industry.
Okay, that was the title from the slide I used last time, and that moderated this statement a little bit and explained the statement a little bit. So, but please don't take this at face value.
No, but I represent an industry where we care about versioning because we deploy embedded devices for 20 years. We care about versioning, and you just said it's stupid that we care about that.
No. Version numbers are just not a very good way to represent the evolution of a protocol.
Right,
And
but what's your solution? I mean, you've not presented a proper solution to that.
Yeah, I didn't want to.
You just said what we're trying to do is stupid.
I didn't try to repeat the entire discussion of IETF108, so I apologize for just extracting the title of that slide. That of course, we all care about evolution, and version numbers are one way of doing this, but they are often not the best way.
You have to have some way of versioning some kind of IoT object as it evolves over time.
Matthew, it's not the version that's stupid, it's the number that's stupid.
Well, either way, what we need a solution. And saying that any version is stupid.
He's proposed one. It just doesn't involve incrementing integers. It involves setting bits in the integer to represent capabilities.
Well, I will say in the OMA Alliance, we spent a lot of time on this, probably 2 or 3 years trying to figure this out. And the best we come up with is we need some kind of numbering. I mean, if you've got a better solution, I'd like to see it presented.
Yeah, I think we got that, and I apologized for just extracting the title of the slide and not its content. So this draft essentially does one thing. It explains how to use the version number that we already have. I think you would be happy with that.
Yeah, so I'm next in the queue. Regarding the version, regarding the draft, I actually have read it a few times. It's very short. I'm sorry I didn't have the time to write it down. The feedback is, mostly positive. Basically, either numbers or using bit fields. It's different ways to represent some new feature. I think it's a valid way. So I'll provide the feedback as soon as I can. Sorry for the delay on that.
Okay, so my summary would be we have one implementation, and Ari, if you can write a sentence or two about that to the mailing list, and it would be good if the people who did the reviews actually also write something to the mailing list. And with that, well, maybe we need a -02, but then we should be ready for working with GLUScore.
At least when I read it, I didn't find anything terribly wrong. But only one review is not enough. I would like maybe Bill, if he committed, and others, would they commit today to provide a review?
Yeah, I was a bit behind with this review thing, so I'll commit to it. Yes.
Okay. It's very short.
Let me have a look at it in the next few days, and then I'll come back to this.
Okay. Anybody? Thank you, Bill. Anybody else would like to volunteer now? Okay. We'll make do with that. So thank you, Carsten. Anything else on this draft?
No, that was it.
Thanks. So then we move on. Are you presenting also data CT?
Yes.
All right.
Okay, Alexei just mentioned on the chat that he has reviewed earlier versions, so that's good.
A good point. Please, minute takers also, often these comments in the chat get forgotten. Please remember to write it down on the minutes. Alexei says that it looks sensible.
So I hope Alexei is still talking about versions and not about the content format indication.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, thanks. So data value content format indication. Next slide. We also have looked at this in previous meetings. So basically, the idea is if you have a CNML record with some binary data values, which in JSON are represented as base64, but they're really binary values, it would be good to be able to say what content format, content type, and content encoding is being in use for that. So this draft defines a content format indication field or CT field. Next slide. So in this example, for instance, it would say that the content format is CBOR. That's the number 60. And then when you decode this base64, you actually see, oh, it's an array with some text in it and the number 42. Next slide. So that's a pretty straightforward thing. We complicated it a bit when we tried to add a must understand version of this field, and that turned out to be more complicated than we could bite off at the time. So we retracted that, and now we have a version that doesn't have that complexity. So there was a working group last call after the last meeting, and there were reviews by Alexei, Jim, and Thomas. Next slide. And one comment was we actually need ABNF for the contents of that field. The ABNF is in a different draft, and we need to understand how we actually handle these drafts. So we can, of course, just copy the content from that other draft into this draft, so we don't have to reference it. But that would, of course, kind of defeat the point of the other draft. Or we could adopt that other draft and put it on the same track. Now, I'm not talking about CNML versions. I'm talking about core media content type format.
I am talking to Michael Riches on his question, not to you.
Oh, but I'm not talking about CNML versions right now. I'm talking about data CT.
So just to clarify, Michael is commenting that to Alexei, which document did he review? And I'm just clarifying that he reviewed CNML version. So this is about
so he is Alexei, not me. Sorry.
Correct.
Yeah, that's always a bit hard when you're talking about slides to also look at the chat and understand what people are saying in there. Okay, so I'm talking about Alexei's review here.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a decision we have to take. Before we discuss this, let me show the other open issue. Next slide. So issue number 1, what does it mean to have a CT without a binary value in the record? Now, this can actually happen when you have a default value for CT, a base CT, in effect. So it's probably the best thing to simply make this allowable, but without consequences. So that's the change that is being proposed, and I'm pretty sure it's innocuous, but of course we all should be thinking about that before we go ahead with it. So that's pretty much the technical content here. And so procedurally, next step, once these two items, next slide, excuse me, the slide is called next steps. Once we have processed these comments, we of course can recheck whether we covered everything that was in the reviews. And then since we didn't really do a lot of technical changes, we probably can submit to ISG at this point. But we still have to decide on how to handle the ABNF issue.
So now we go for comments. Matt, you're in the queue.
Matt, we don't hear you.
I'm sorry. I'm not really good at this. So what are the proposed solutions to these problems? I don't really see drafts that really address them that you proposed.
Can you repeat the question? I'm not following.
Can you hear me?
Yes, but I didn't quite get the question from what you said. Can you?
I guess I'm trying to understand what are the problems that are trying to be addressed with these last couple slides.
Well, there were two review comments. Or do you mean with the draft as a whole?
I guess what is the use case?
The use case is that you.
What I'm struggling with that we do not have a problem with.
Well, if you want to use binary data in a cinema record, right now there is no way to say what these binary data mean. And the CT field allows you to say what.
Okay, so you want a new CT field?
Yes.
Okay, I'm cool with that.
Thank you.
So any more comments?
Any comments in particular on the ABNF issue? Ari?
So I guess the impact of the ABNF issue is that if we don't bring it here, it would have to wait for the media content type format to become an RFC before this becomes an RFC, because it would be a normative reference.
Yes, and if we do bring it here, it means that this draft becomes the place where we fix the ABNF. So I don't actually see a big difference there.
As authors, do you have a preference, or it's the same? I guess you're choosing this one since you're presenting on this draft. Right? Ari, Carsten?
Well, I think Ari just expressed a weak preference, and I think I expressed my preference as well, so I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, sorry, I think you are preferring this draft, basically. Just to
Who's you?
Sorry? You, excuse me. You as in Carsten, the person in the presentation. Yes.
I prefer to do the whole thing properly in the other draft and reference it from this draft.
Fair enough.
And I'm also okay with that, assuming that we don't get that other draft doesn't get stuck in the process for a very long time, because the CT is essentially ready to publish. But I guess we can do the whole way with this. I mean, going forward, I keep having the normative reference and just make sure that the media content type format, goes smoothly.
Yeah.
And if
we always have an emergency exit. I mean, we can switch to copying the stuff over if the other document gets stuck on something else.
Exactly.
Alexi is commenting on the, well, actually, Marco, you're the JavaScript, so feel free to comment anytime.
Was jumping in. There's a question from Alexi. If the reference document needs to be dispatched.
I think that's almost a question to the AD.
repeat the question, please?
Yeah, Alex is asking on the Jabber if the reference draft needs to be dispatched, actually.
If it needs to be, I mean, why wouldn't that just be part of this working group? Why do you think it needs to be dispatched?
He says, if I remember correctly, the reference draft doesn't belong to email core or core.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, sure, I suppose that's the best way to handle it. Sure.
Shall I just talk? Sorry.
Yeah, easier.
The reference draft is more generic about use of media types, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's true.
So email core charter doesn't allow, it's sort of a related thing, but at the moment it's not in scope for the charter because we have...
It's definitely not in scope for email core.
And it's more generic than core, that's why I don't think it's the right place for...
Yeah, okay. So yeah, take it to dispatch.
Okay, then, well, many takers, please take note of that so that we don't forget about it.
Okay, so my plan would be to have another look at that document because I haven't looked at it for a while. Republish another version if there's anything that needs to be fixed. It's on the slide, the draft Borman core media. It's no longer on the slide. Now it's on the slide again. It's no longer on the slide. Yes, it's on the slide. Draft Borman core media content type format. So this is essentially a reaction to the problem that we have been having in about a dozen core documents that we never quite properly distinguished media types from content types, and that we used content format where we actually meant content type and vice versa. And so this is essentially a housekeeping document that will be a little bit like a 2119 for for this group, so we can just refer to it when we define the terminology of a specific document. So that's the idea, and the Cinema Data CT document would be the first one that actually benefits from this housekeeping. And of course, we want to tell a lot of people HTTP API and email core and everything once we get to the working class call of that, because we want to make sure that we are not creating conflicts for them, but it's a core document in the first place.
Okay, so maybe just to clarify a bit, so on Borman core media content type, that one will be shepherded by Alexi, or at least he's volunteering on the chat, right? And Carsten, on this document, then would you expect any major changes for the next version? So can we let people know that they should start doing the reviews as soon as possible? Or would you prefer
I don't know. I haven't read it for a year, so it doesn't reflect the events of the last 12 months or whatever.
Okay.
So
maybe
I think we need to spend another week. I don't mind if people tell me what's wrong, so I can fix it right away. But we should do a larger outreach with the next version of the document.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so thank you so much. Anything else from this document? Anything else you want to relay?
So back to Cinema Data CT. Can we working group last call? Excuse me, we did working group last call. Can we submit this thing with a dangling reference?
I guess that's not up to me. You're asking the AD right now, right? Or I don't think it's I mean, the AD has been in this call and he knows the pending reference. I guess is not to the working group, right? Or is to the AD, right? I don't know what is the proper pattern on this.
Well, we submit documents to the ISG all the time that have dangling references. So, of course, it would be good to hear whether the AD thinks that's a good idea, but it's also something that this working group should have an opinion on.
The AD has no particular opinion on it, as you say. If a reference if a normative reference isn't ready, the RFC editor will hold it. So it's not an issue as long as there's something available for the people who review the document to refer to. We're good.
All right.
Yeah, it probably would be a good idea to adopt, to go through the adoption before we get all the reviews in the last call context, the IETF last call context.
I'm sorry, you mean the adoption of the other document in dispatch, right? Just to clarify for the minutes.
Well, I think we didn't answer the question whether dispatch is actually needs to be involved, but it's probably a good idea to inform dispatch. So that's something we should do in any case.
All right.
Yeah.
Barry, you are still on the call? I mean, you are still on the mic? Mike?
Yeah, I don't know that there's anything else I need to say. Basically, I agree with what Karsten said. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything more I need to say.
All right, fair enough.
Okay, so, I think the next steps are clear.
Yes. Let's move on then to the next draft, if that's okay with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have blockwise, I believe John will be presenting. Are you there with us, John?
Yep, that's correct. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, the audio is very good. Just
Excellent.
a second. For some reason now the tab appears. Just a second, sorry.
Okay, next slide, please.
Well, I hope people don't mind that there is this browser window on the top. I don't know how to remove it right now.
Okay, so just basically covering the changes since we had the last interim call. Is one outstanding question and the next steps. Next slide, please. Okay, so the updates in 02 as opposed to 01, we're just basically saying that the options that you either have to support both or neither. You can't just support one of the two of them. We talked about or updated how tokens can be handled to reduce the number to be tracked because we can be sending out a whole load of requests at once and they need individual tokens. Some clarifications about when multiple instances are being used, and we removed the restriction on the 231 response code and how we handle packets that we can't send responses back to because there's too many, let's say, options, some sort of Christmas tree packet coming in. Next slide, please. Updated the definition of how we are holding the data in terms of the response to say we need these specific blocks to be retransmitted. Making just notes about the fact that every max payloads, when we send out up to 10 packets, then congestion control kicks in and there's an ACK timeout delay. Making the recommendation that it's not used in a no-sec security mode because of potential security issues if we don't do that. And there was a comment in there about repeat request. We've clarified that by updating how we're using the M bit in the blocks. And we went for changing the name of the options to Q block 1 and Q block 2, which will be a subject of a couple of slides hence. Next slide, please. Okay, so for the option naming, originally it was block 3, block 4. That was said that there was confusion because there's block 1 and block 2. We set up a doodle for the naming, and out of that, the people who responded, we went for Q block. Now, there has been some comments about Q block may not be acceptable in certain parts of the world. We're just looking for, is it good to continue with Q block or should we be using some other block here? And either we take a decision here or we go back and revisit the poll, add our selections, and we come up with a naming of this new block mechanism is taking place. So any comments at this point?
Some preference in the chat for tough block from Michael. I remember Karsten also advocating for that in previous occasions.
Okay, we need to settle on something as a name.
If I may, just a reminder to the group that now is the time to make this kind of decision. Let's not do bike shedding for a long time, please. So if you have a preference, just go to the chat and just say it.
Christian aligns with Michael essentially. Tough block preferred, Q block can be fine as well. And Karsten follows. And Ira as well. Seems there's more consensus around tough block. And Ari asks about the background around tough block, and I think Karsten proposed that originally.
Yeah, essentially is that we have here the ability to be able to send a stream of packets like in a kind of a non-environment where we can have unidirectional transmission of blocks, and there is block recovery in the protocol, etc. And it just is the name for the block that supports this. We can send multiple blocks without having to wait for acknowledge. Because the standard block 1, block 2 has a request response synchronization step, whereas with this quick block, tough block, is that we have the ability to be able to send out a block of data, and if it happens to get lost in ether, it doesn't matter quite as much, but there is recovery mechanisms in place. So tough, resilient, able to recover is where that sort of tough block came from. But Q block, it's so I think with Q block, unless there's something to do with Carsten's reference that Q block or Q minus is a bad prefix, I think it was stateside. I think I prefer to go with the Q block.
Marco, can you relay the chat, or should I?
Sorry, I was tapping in the minutes. I can relay that you prefer Q block, and Matt thinks we should keep Q block too.
Yep. All right, so we have about half and half, and I guess it's up to the authors at this point, Q block or tough block. I guess you prefer Q block. Unless somebody has a very strong opinion against Q block, I'd say we go for Q block. Alexi would like his yellow bike. Okay, then we can move on this subject, I think.
Okay, yep, next slide then, please. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, so we have in here congestion control, which is absolutely correct, especially as we're talking about primarily UDP here and network flooding and all the rest of it. So when we have a large body of data to send, it gets parceled down into the now Q blocks, and we're either pushing it up to the server or the server sending a response back to us. But in there we have the concept of max payloads, that in every 10 packets we have an ACK timeout delay, just to make sure that we're just not flooding the network. By using con, we can see that there's an acknowledgement, and in particular to the max payload packet. If a con comes back, we know that the network is still functioning, and we can then carry on transmitting. But in the environments that specifically these blocks came up for, which is in sort of DDoS attack environments where there's network losses, we can't always use a con, because we then lose that packet. We then enter the retransmit cycle, and 93 seconds later, whatever it is, we come out of that. So in the case of none, which is the preferred how we operated in the particular lossy environment, we would be waiting for ACK timeouts. And so the question really came up is how can we reduce these turnaround times if the network and the environment are all fine and can handle the particular sort of packet load. So the concept of signaling something in the max payload packet to say, I want a response of some sort. If the response doesn't come back through lossy networks, we still wait the ACK timeout. It's not the end of the world. We just continue, but it would be nice to be able to speed things up. So next slide, please. It was suggested last time around that we can use the no response option, which is an excellent idea, but it only works for pushing data to the server. The no response option can't be used for when the server wants to send back some sort of subscription observe response or whatever it may be. The no response is not a standards track. I don't know if that's an issue, but really the question is also how can we handle block 2? And if we are using for whatever we do for Q block 2, we could need to think about doing it for Q block 1 as well. Does it make sense for both? Last time around, proposed that we added in an additional bit into the block option, the R bit, and if set just means trigger some sort of response or trigger the next get request. It came back with how about the no response option, but we looked into that and we found that unfortunately it only works for Q block 1. So is it worth going forward with something like this response bit, or does the working group think, well, does it really matter if we just have this ACK timeout at 2 seconds pause periodically? So that's really where the question here is. Any feedback?
Just go ahead. Don't wait for. There is not a lot of people in the queue. Just go ahead.
On the topic of is that ACK timeout okay? I think you are the best to answer that. So do you expect to run into this that often at all? I mean, given that 10 payloads are already quite a bit. Is this a problem for your application? Because if it is, then it needs to be addressed. If not, you have the driving use case.
Okay, I'm driving use. Okay, so what we're talking about here is passing telemetry information about what's happening with ongoing attacks between the client and the server. And if there is a fairly aggressive Christmassy tree type attack that's taking place, which is taking place with multiple vectors and multiple things going on at the same time, then it's very easy to overflow the 10 packets.
Okay.
But if we can't come forward, there's a 2-second delay, and a 2-second delay is not critical in terms of DDoS attacks, but it's nice to be able to, for the peers to be able to exchange information so that people who are trying to mitigate the attack can be more effective more quickly, or if they're using AI to kind of control the attacks.
I'd be happy to look into the no response in the other direction again, whether I can come up with something. I haven't had the time to look through that particular question yet.
Sure. Okay, but the no response, it's a third party, i.e. not core standard, it's not a standards track. So modifying that will be difficult, and also the fact that it says response in its name is not appropriate. It could be that we come up with another option to handle this, but I'm just not. I just don't want to spawn off options for the sake of options.
Sorry, Jaime.
Yeah, just a very quick question. Maybe I misunderstood, but wasn't it in DOTS that the data path was RESTconf and signaling was was using co-op, and that therefore the telemetry was going to go over RESTconf? Or maybe I misunderstood that part. Sorry for that.
Okay, so there is some telemetry stuff that is passed over RESTconf, which basically is vendor mapping. So these attack IDs mean this type stuff. But in terms of the actual telemetry signaling, that would be done over the signal channel because, again, we are challenged by we're working in lossy networks.
Yep.
And RESTconf doesn't work that well when it's when attacks are taking place. But we need to get the telemetry information across if we can.
Okay, and just for clarification for people in core, would it be possible to have some access to some sample data of the kind of signaling data being sent over co-op during those attacks? Do you have something you can share?
Certainly, I can create some information of that. It'd be yeah, I can create some information and just put it on the list for that. There's no problem at all.
Thank you so much.
Just to relay a comment now a few minutes ago from Med that 2 seconds is not critical, it's just an optimization. And so far they have recorded the issue.
Very good. I don't think there are more comments, John.
Okay, sure. Okay, next slide then, please. Thank you. Yeah, so it's really is, do we make any changes to do with this additional bit maybe, or whatever it may be, but the implementation, there is already a code that is working on this front that I have working here, so I can modify it or not, as the case may be, based on further decisions. Other than that, you know, we're ready for a working group last call. From my position, it's otherwise it's ready to go. It does what it says on the tin. Any other comments or feedback?
Okay, so usually for the step of working group last call, we get a few more reviews normally. I was wondering maybe if some of those who have been active on this work, but not the authors, like for instance Christian or others, would like to volunteer to do a last review, or if we would like to do the review during the working group last call as well. I mean, that's another option. Okay, Christian is nodding. Very good. Thank you, Christian. I did ask 2 questions though. So were you noting for the review? I know you're gonna do a review, but I guess to you it doesn't matter whether it's during the working group last call or before, right?
Exactly.
All right, very good. Anybody else would like to volunteer a review? All right. So what we can do then, once you submit 03, I think we can do the working group last call and then hope for reviews during that time.
Okay, the only change that will be in the 03 is to do with handling this max payload issue. That's the only thing we're expecting to change. Everything else at the moment is good and ready to go.
All right. So people can start reviewing already. Michael, you're in the queue. Go ahead.
So if it can only run over next NoSec, that seems to tell me that it has to run over a DTLS and it can't run.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I may have had too many double negatives. It cannot run in a NoSec. Well, the recommendation is it does not run in a NoSec environment, i.e. we do have to have DTLS in place. Absolutely.
You have to have DTLS, but I think that we can't use this with OS core because OS core would be within it. Right? Because the COAP headers would be outside of the OS core ID context.
Okay. We do say in the draft it can be in or out. It's up to the implementer what they want to do there.
We just need to have those bits authenticated, which OS core does.
Okay, when you say bits authenticated, what do you mean by
well,
bits
the point is that the point is that you'd better have some security on the request, otherwise it's an amplification packet amplification system, right? So that's the point I think is that you're trying to make, and I'll read the document to see that I got.
Sure. Yeah. It just is that people can abuse the source address and cause issues. Absolutely. And hence why there should be a security environment of some sort, so that there is trust, that you do trust where it's coming from.
My audio on, actually. I don't get feedback on the screen anymore.
And there are comments on Jabber from Michael on the usage of OSCORE as not validating the originating IP address. And Matt is asking for more feedback on the draft text. Also about it, I think. And
Maybe
Christian will do.
Maybe others familiar with OSCORE could provide a review from that point of view too. Joran, go ahead.
Yeah, it sounds like Christian is saying exactly that in Jabber.
All right, sorry, I didn't. Oh yes, thank you, Christian. Okay, then Jon, if you're okay, you don't have any further comments, then we move on to the next presentation. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Have one of the old drafts that we have been working on with for a while as just a second build, because I really like to have the proper full screen. I don't know what's happening with this. I'm open for suggestions, by the way, on the full screen thing.
Other than your application.
Does it work if you use just one browser window instead of a tab?
This is good.
Well, let's yeah, I don't know. Let's just use this. Sorry for that again.
No problem. I guess you can hear me and see me, right?
Yes.
Yes, we hear you and see you very well.
Thank you. Okay. Well, hello everybody. Good to be back for CORE. I'm sorry that I've been a bit silent lately. It's just been work. But this is a quick update here about what's happening with DynLink, which is at version 11 right now. Can we please move to the next slide? Or yeah. So I'm just gonna take a bit of time to solicit some feedback about some developments that are going on in DynLink. My screen just flashed, so is everything okay?
All good, all good.
Good. So DynLink is currently at version 11. We are close to releasing version 12. Constantly, as always, whenever there is feedback received, then we try to incorporate that, and especially any kind of corrections and clarifications. So the slide set I'm describing right now is basically what's in the editor's copy, right? Or what is in the editor's copy at the moment, and also about the new proposals, which are pretty much exclusively coming from OMA. So I thought I'll brief you about what's happening there and then get your feedback there as well. Can we move to the next slide, please? So as always, the editor's draft is available in GitHub. That's the link to the editor's draft. And when I refer to DynLink latest, that's basically what's there. We have now 2 new attributes in the DynLink draft, EP-min and EP-max. We had rather colorful discussions and some recommendations on how to proceed forward. But I think we have some consensus that will include these 2 attributes, which are also used in the Lightweight M2M specifications. And EP-min is an evaluation period that indicates a minimum time, and that's separate from P-min. And EP-max is the maximum evaluation period between the 2 evaluation between the 2 sampling periods that the server may wait, and then notify the client. So EP-min and EP-max are currently in the editor's draft. Are there any comments on this? Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. These next few slides are basically recommendations and suggestions that have been put forward by both Dave Navarro and Alan Soloway from the OMA. This particular slide mentions an interesting scenario in which we should allow P-min to be equal to P-max in certain use cases. So the current wording in DynLink states that the maximum period of P-max must be greater than 0 and must be greater than P-min if it's present, if P-min is present. The logic behind that is that pmin basically defines the minimum time between two consecutive notifications, even if the resource state has changed. Whereas pmax refers to the maximum time between two notifications if the resource state has not changed. Christian, you are on the queue.
Does it say for either pmin or pmax which party is responsible for cutting the other party's slack for non-synchronized clocks?
No, there's nothing about synchronization here at all. So no. But that's the suggestion from the OMA is that they actually have a use case where they have an implementer who is looking towards sending exactly one notification per n second. So what they were wondering is if there is any need to have this strong constraint that pmax must always be greater than pmin, or instead have pmax equal to pmin if the client wants notifications to be sent every n seconds. So if we go with that, then the text has to change so that the pmax must be greater than 0 and must be greater or equal to pmin if pmin is present. So I'd just like to get some feedback on this new proposal from anybody. Are you okay with this, or are you against this, or do you have strong support for that? And incidentally, these are all GitHub issues, so you can also go to GitHub and keep your comments there.
Yes, I'll make sure to relay these to Alan and Klaus, which I guess they will have opinions on this, and they comment on the GitHub.
Dave had actually sent this on the mailing list in core, but there were no responses there. So and then he raised the GitHub issue. So I wanted to just ensure that this is not something that that goes unnoticed, and I thought I'll raise this up now. And then, as usual, we have been a bit dormant with Dynalink at the moment, so we'll have to get back the either in interims or then have our small meetings and then discuss this each case individually. But if there are no comments on this one, then let's go to the next slide. So the next three
Alexi, there is a comment in the chat from Alexi that it seems reasonable to allow this.
Okay, thank you, Alexi. All right, that's good. Then the next three slides will actually be talking about new attributes. If you move to the next slide, please. And these are all, by the way, attributes that are found in the LiveWire core specs. And I think I'm not sure if they are already there, since I don't have the visibility to the specifications. They are either in the current specifications, or they are being incorporated into the new one, 1.2. But the first of these is an attribute called edge. And
Bill, sorry for cutting just a second. Since you're asking, I think we have in the call Hannes and Matt. I'm not so familiar with the attribute edge. At least it doesn't ring a bell to me. Maybe they can quickly comment, please.
Hi, this is Hannes. I don't want to talk about the edge, and maybe David and Matt are more qualified to do so. But regarding the specifications, sort of they are publicly available. The latest one, which was just got approved this week, needs to be uploaded. So that's why you haven't seen it there, or haven't seen it yet. So.
Okay. Thank you, Hannes.
Is
there somebody else?
Is what specifications do you not have open access to, and how can I fix that? Because we believe that all of our specifications are open.
Okay. What I meant to say was that basically I haven't seen the current specifications to see if these attributes are already there.
But you're making presentations assuming that you have not seen them.
Sorry. So I'm basing this on the GitHub issues that are being put into the core working group repository for Dynalink.
Okay, so you did find access. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So let's say that it might be in the new specification. So that's what I'm using it.
Bill, okay. I'll make sure that we have a look on the H con and HQMax.
Yes.
On the OMA organization.
Thank you. You're right. So I'm just raising these issues up. These three attributes. The edge basically is the attribute specifically applied to Boolean resources to indicate either falling edge or rising edge. There's nothing very controversial about that, and I think that's actually a fairly valid use case. But I'd like to ask for comments on anybody who might have anything to say about this being included into the DynLink draft.
Just from looking at it, sounds a bit tricky to get this guaranteed through a proxy. Because if only the rising edge values are sent, then the proxy might see this as a repetition, unless there is in addition some Pmax value that ensures that the value is forwarded anyway, which would result in a max H. That means that the proxy needs to send it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other comments? Okay, if not, let's go to the next one. Hannes.
Yeah, I don't know if participants saw that David just posted the link to the chat window. I actually wasn't aware that staff had uploaded this. So this is the version 1.2 of the specification, which is brand new, something we had worked on over a long period of time, and contains a couple of new interesting features, multi-transport gateway support, etc. So for those who care about IoT device management, might want to take a look at that specification.
Okay.
And it also contains information about this, given that it hasn't been available in the DynLink draft, but the intention is to have sort of the whole bundle, the DynLink document with these attributes to be available as a IETF ROC, and then to make a reference instead of including the text in the lightweight M2M specification itself, because we have been extensively using and referencing the work from this group.
Okay, and also I think Dave is here. I'm sorry, Dave, that I didn't see that you were in the call when I checked. So we just covered one of the GitHub issues that you just raised regarding the Pmin, Pmax. And if you have any comments on that, then please feel free to mention it. I'm trying to monitor the chat as well at the same time. So, okay, thank you. All right, so then let's go to the next attribute, which is called the con. And this is taken, and I believe that Alan, when he put these issues in GitHub, he basically took the text from the core spec itself. So this the terminology is very specific to live M2M, but obviously that needs to be modified in order to fit into DynLink. But essentially, the notification confirmable attribute specifies that all notifications must be sent over a confirmable transport. I'm not completely aware what confirmable transport really means in this case, whether you're talking about observe just having a non and con, or are we talking about using something like a TCP instead of UDP? So if Dave, you can, yes, Dave is in the queue. Hello. Can you see me?
First, I'm sorry to be mute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So yes, in the lightweight M2M specification, there is a separation between the lightweight M2M protocol and the transport, which can be co-op or new things now. So hence the strange wording. But basically, it's this: when you are using co-op over UDP to observe a resource, this attribute will just tell you to send the notification as confirmable message, co-op confirmable message, instead of co-op non-confirmable response.
Okay. Matt is on the line too.
Matt, go ahead.
David already said what I was going to say.
All right. Then we have Christian.
Sorry to say, come up with the same thing all over again. this is something that works for the origin server, but it doesn't necessarily work for proxies. So I think we now have the separation of things that configure the server and things that are actually kind of relating, that work in the REST architecture. And if this goes into this configuring the server bin, so be it. But I don't think that this is a general thing that we should advertise for co-op, because this works as long as you don't have proxies in there. And yes, that might be a situation in which some architectures are, but this is not the generic case. So if it's in that bin, meh. But it should be noted there.
Christian, this is Hannes. Can you explain the problems you see with the proxy?
The thing is, if you set this con attribute, the proxy might not be aware that this is a kind of this. So you're setting up something like an observation, or you're setting up any transport, and the server will send this notification. And it will send it in a con, and it will send it to the proxy through which that observation was established, and the proxy will receive that, and the proxy will have to make its own decision whether to send that through a con or through a non, or maybe that next hop on the proxy is over TCP, and then the next after that will forward it as a non or con as well. So the proxy cannot rely. You cannot rely on all hops in the proxy chain as sending this value as con. And even if you do, if after this con another non comes around, maybe the other proxy doesn't even see that something was sent on this con. So you can tell the server that you want the server to do something like this, but you can't expect this to extend over the whole chain.
Well, then I can also add to the comment that this has been a recurring discussion also with PMIN and PMAX, right, Bill, on the proxy. So it's also up to the group to comment now, or the kind of behavior that we should expect when these messages are routed through proxies. Is the expectation that the attribute has to be honored all throughout the path, or is the expectation that it's not? So it's also a good point for discussion.
Yeah. I think we had discussed this that this should be a hop by hop feature and not an end-to-end feature. But this is a good point to bring up right now also, because there are such attributes in the dyne link that actually affect implementation behavior if we don't really know what the proxies are going to be doing.
Yeah, I don't want to speak on behalf of Alan, but I guess on one of the discussions, at least, it was mentioned that the view on Lightweight end-to-end, at least, or other SDOs, is that is end-to-end and not hop by hop. So that's a different design choice there. So just to keep it in mind also.
Well, this is Hannes again. Yeah, in the lightweight M2M architecture, there's no proxy per se, so the issue doesn't occur. But yeah, it's definitely something worthwhile to look into on how this relates to some of the others and what could be done to make it workable through proxy if someone wants to have that feature.
The thing is, if you want to specify it in core, I think it has to work with the generic REST architecture. If it only needs to work for the lightweight M2M case where there are no proxies, then this is something that can be extended on the lists of attributes we define here for this particular application.
I think that's you have a specific preference on how you would like to see these things working, and it's like maybe that's shared by others in the group as well. But since I'm also a member of the group, I don't share that view. But I always thought that the proxy design was a mistake. But yeah, here we go.
Maybe we should have that extended discussion at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a nice discussion for another interim. And looking at the clock now, and we still have a few items, I don't want to push out other presentations. So if you could, Bill, continue, or I don't know if you have.
Yeah, so I have just one other attribute that was put into the list, and I don't believe that we need to discuss that thoroughly, since we can schedule some time during interim. So the last attribute that was proposed by Alan was HQ max, which was for maximum historical queue. And it's a very wordy little passage that I've written here, but essentially it refers to what happens when the Live M2M client is in disconnected mode, basically, and then when it comes back online. So this is the behavior, that how much should be stored and how much should be conveyed to the Live M2M server in this case. But please have a look at the downlink issues in GitHub, and we'll go through these in a more detailed meeting.
Yes, thank you, Bill.
Okay, so and that was the last one I had. Yeah, go ahead.
No,
please.
So I guess so from what I'm seeing, document-wise, this still needs some work, right? There's no conclusion.
Yeah, I think with the current with the current inclusions, we need to discuss some more, and then afterwards we'll have to then work on the binding tables and and the editorial changes that need to be done. Yeah.
Okay, but I guess the biggest issue, and Marco also correct me, or Bill, or both, is this end-to-end versus hop by hop. And I guess we could have an interim after IETF109 and discuss explicitly that, just to clear it out.
Yeah, I think that would work.
Okay. Marco, you said you agreed, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So
just time check. We are about 25 minutes late and essentially consumed the flex time. So we have enough scheduled time for all the following documents.
Fair enough. Feel free to use the countdown clock, by the way, Marco. We can also use that feature, because I cannot keep track of the time at the same time. I'm trying, but it's kind of hard with the discussions. Well, thank you, Bill. So
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Okay. I guess that was all.
No, that's all I wanted to say. That's not much else. So thank you, and let's continue the discussions later.
Perfect.
I think the next presentation is Fazor, actually.
Yeah, I agree. Damn it. Sorry for that.
There it is.
Okay. Can you hear me well?
We hear you.
Yes.
There is a bit of a static noise, actually. But I don't know if it's you or us.
Is this better now?
We hear you sufficiently good. Yeah, please continue. No problem.
Okay, hopefully. Okay, I try to do this very quickly so we can keep the schedule. So this is a quick status update on Fazor's draft. Next, please. So there hasn't been a status update for a while, so a very quick recap on what's this all about. So Fazor is an alternative algorithm for co-op to handle retransmission timeout and congestion control. So it's optional mechanism, just like the COCOA. And I'm not going to go do the details how it works, but just saying that it's pretty similar to the TCP timer mechanism, which provides the two-state exponential backoff logic, but we add there an additional state, and that allows the Fazor to have one quick retransmission to address random wireless losses. So recovering quickly in those cases, but at the same time, it kind of does the full backoff to take care of potential congestion. So if the loss was not because of random error, but congestion. Next, please. So 0.0 version was published in March after the working group adoption. There we addressed the feedback from Krister that was regarding the retransmission count option. So we clarified the limitations in the use of the option. So basically saying that for example, if there is a proxy in use which is sending empty acknowledgements, then the option cannot be used because there is no such way to send an option with the empty acknowledgement. And we also clarified the meaning of the new destination endpoint. And in 01, that was published in last month, we further clarified the retransmission account option. So now we just simply explicitly say that we increment the value by 1 on each retransmission. And just a few additional editorial changes. So that's basically. Also, as we can see, there has not been much modification for over 1 year now. So that takes us to the next steps. And the next slide, please. So what obviously we would like to have and what is needed is more reviews. So please read the draft and provide us feedback. And we need also, because this is about the congestion control, so we need some feedback from the or reviews from the transport area as well. And I believe that in after a couple of revisions, we hopefully then are ready for the very good last. So that's all. Any questions or comments?
Carlos, go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, I think this is important work and very interesting work.
Sorry, Carlos, I have a hard time to hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, now it's better.
Yeah. Okay, so I was saying, first of all, I believe this is important work and also interesting, an interesting mechanism. And one comment would be about the amount of evaluation work related with this document. So when we did the work on COCO, we were warned that we would need to make it sure that the document, well, the mechanism would be safe. And we did lots of evaluation, and well, it was only in the end that we found, well, you found some issues in some scenarios. So do you have like a plan for evaluation of this mechanism?
So, okay, we have done the, from our part, the evaluation, and it would be very, very good if we have some additional evaluation by some other folks. I haven't checked there are a number of papers that have been very recently or quite recently published if someone actually already has done. So that's something that we need to check if there is already additional evaluation. But any evaluation is very welcome. Currently, we don't have plans to do additional evaluation by ourselves, but
Yes, and perhaps another comment would be to try to get evaluations in a diversity of scenarios, including different topologies, technologies, traffic patterns, and so on. So it would be good to see also, well, any papers coming from the research community on this.
yeah, sure. It would be very, very good if anyone there is having these different kind of environments. Of course, we had quite a large emulated set of characteristics there, different buffer sizes, different loss probabilities and such, but of course more is better.
Yeah, so in the chat they're just saying that there's a bit of noise in the audio, but I guess regarding this draft, the authors would like more comments, and also from the transport area. I guess Marco and I can contact the transport area chairs to make sure that we get some reviews there. And regarding the group, I would like to ask for reviewers. Does anybody can anybody commit to a review so we can move this document forward? Except the author. Just go ahead and type on the chat if you want to provide a review, or go to the microphone. I mean, we need to conclude this document. It has been quite some time ready from the alpha point of view. We just need the reviews. And is my audio okay?
Yeah. It's
Okay. Sorry.
Okay, Carlos is volunteering. Thanks a lot, Carlos.
Thank you, Carlos. Okay, then we will take it to the list also to ask for more reviews. And after that, I think, unless there is some major changes and you need to do another revision, after that we can go for working with last call. Right, Marco?
Sorry, Ahmed, there's actually a comment in the chat from Carlos. He can review the document in the next couple of months.
Yeah, that's what Marco just said. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Marco.
Okay, thanks.
So something seems to be odd again with my video, but at least do you hear me?
We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So
just a second. Let me just try once again. Go ahead.
okay. So hello. I'd like to present potential transport for co-op that is over GATT, which is, next slide, please, the generic attribute profile for of Bluetooth Low Energy. So this would be, yeah, next slide, please. The hard question here is, of course, why would we want to do this? Because we already have a perfectly good way of using co-op over Bluetooth, that is IPSP. And the reason I propose this is that we have the same situation that we have with web browser applications, also with smartphones. So while in theory, the device that would want to participate in the Internet of Things has the technical capabilities to, in co-op over WebSockets case, open a TCP connection, open a UDP connection, and in this and the Bluetooth case, run IPSP. The application is typically not in a position to do the full to actually use it. So while IPSP has been implemented in Linux, it's not practically available on Android, and same seems to be true for iOS-based devices. So if you have a smartphone and you have a device and you want, basically you are in control of both of them, but you can't establish a connection over co-op yet. So this is proposing to tunnel co-op over GATT, because GATT is available on everything for phone applications, and at least for Chrome, even from the browser. And like co-op over WebSockets, this is not something that you should ever do if you can avoid it. But implementers that I've talked to and users often find themselves in a situation where all they get is the very limited co-op Bluetooth stack that the operating system offers, and GATT seems to be the smallest common denominator of those. There is a potential additional use case in that this could be combined with SHIC to even make things available that don't speak co-op natively without real application-specific software, but more with application-specific headers. And I don't use out of font characters lightly. There is a large question mark behind this for a very good reason. And this is just something that can be explored while going along with this. Next slide, please. So the mechanism that is currently proposed is to have a Bluetooth characteristic, and that the I'll say phone to just identify the rows because I'm not too good with the full Bluetooth terminology, uses the Bluetooth write method to write the method, any options and the payload into that characteristic, and later on read it back out, where there is a notification mechanism and where there's a way, like a notification mechanism that allows asynchronous processing here, and also there is a mechanism to do those writes in a reliable way. So we don't have to import the whole message ID and message type mechanism from co-op over UDP, and at least that's something that I'm playing around with here. We might not even need to do tokens because there is already a multiplexing mechanism available for those descriptors. So why not use that? In practice, it's showing that one limit here is the MTU, which appears to be for most modern devices 512 bytes, which means that we can transport the full kind of a reasonable co-op message in there. We just have to fragment on the co-op level, but we have the mechanisms for that, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue. But this still needs further experimentation on what practical devices really offer, because if the specification-wise, this could go down to something like 32 byte, and we can't really work in that area anymore, even with block-wise fragmentation without creating huge overhead. So if that is really relevant, then some additional fragmentation mechanism might be necessary. But right now, I hope we can avoid that. Next slide, please. The hardest part about this, I think, is not how to align it technically, but how to make it work with the URI space that we all use. So what co-op over WebSockets and TCP, etc. are doing, they're introducing this additional scheme, which then could encode the Bluetooth address, or as in the web browser case, just some identifier which really behaves, and that's the third line here, behaves like an interface identifier. It's unusable across devices for reasons of privacy from within the browser. So those would not be well expressible in practice, but they would serve at least as some baseline here. Of course, there's still the ongoing work in protocol negotiation, which would allow us to use better identifiers here and possibly even link this in with the rest of the name system. But that's at the current point rather speculative and primarily hinging on protocol negotiation. So for now, unless good ideas come up here, which is part of why I'm doing this, I'd stick with the above just because this is how we have been doing it in previous protocols. But still, protocol negotiation needs to come at some point, probably even before we can specify this in any standards track document. Before I get to the next steps, there's next slide, please. Just kind of as a brief demo on how this looks like in practice. So even if you're running from a smartphone, you can go to a website. You can access that Bluetooth device by pushing a button. Then the browser asks you. Basically, the browser looks through what is available locally, allows you to pair with one of those, and which in many cases doesn't involve any additional steps, and then you can run code over that and use any security contexts, for example, like OSCORE that you establish however you establish them. Next slide, please. And once you've clicked there, you see the co-op exchange playing out here. So this is a very minimal demo. I have one implementation for each site out there or two. A third party has implemented this as well. So this is working enough to run, but of course it's still very early. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of implementation experiments to gather here, and I'm actively doing this in parallel with advancing the draft further to see whether there need to be additional changes and also to expand the functionality. I mean, right now this can't even send requests from the device to the smartphone, so this is clearly not a full co-op transport yet. But yeah, right now I'd like to, so my proposal is to keep this as an experimental document that just describes that there are people who are running co-op over GET, and this is how they do it. But yeah, basically, I'd like to hear from the working group whether you want to have some work about this here, or whether you have any other good input that I could process into this. Thank you.
There's an input already from John Matson on Jabber. On Jabber, it's good to extend the support for co-op for other environments platform, especially BLE is popular, and experimental seems a good way to take it. And Karsten concurs.
So why isn't this draft being implemented in 6.0 versus Core app versus Core?
The thing, so 6.0, there is already a way to do 6.0 over Bluetooth. That is IPSP, and that works. And this is the preferred.
Why not present a better way to do it there?
The thing is, the way to do it there is already good. But applications often find themselves in a situation where they can't do it right, and then they have to do it wrong, which is by hooking into a mechanism that is not designed for this kind of thing, but that happens to be the only thing that operating systems expose. So this is a workaround. And sure, this could be made into a workaround that also encompasses 6.0, which is something that was proposed by, in a similar way, by developers at Fitbit, who published their, I think they call it Golden Gate proposal, which is basically UDP over GATT, which is just, or IP over GATT even, which is kind of having the same drawbacks, but just pulling in more layers. So yes, that would be an alternative, but I think that given that we are all already kind of stacking up workarounds here, going for co-op right away is the easier and more convenient approach, especially given that this will never end up visible to an operating system. So you can't use the operating system's network stack, which you usually would want to use anyway, and would then need to ship your additional IP stack if you were to use IP over BLE and then UDP and co-op over that.
Michael, go ahead, please.
So I browsed your document because I mentioned the interest at the beginning of the session, and you mentioned you're talking about it. And I go, oh, okay. So somewhere in the document it says CoAP plus GATT, GATT, and then other places it says Bluetooth. And I looked at the W3C document a little bit. It's long. I don't know why it's so long, but what I didn't discover yet is how or if the Bluetooth connection gets authenticated, or shared, I guess is the term in Bluetooth.
So the way I think this would be primarily employed is with Bluetooth Just Works mode, which is no authentication at all. And in BLE is at least kind of, what do you call it, opportunistic encryption.
Mm-hmm.
I see no way why this would not be combinable with all the other ways of Bluetooth authentication, and that might even be a good thing for some deployments. But in the end, security should probably not rely on Bluetooth security, but on something that can be secured on top of co-op, which would practically be OSCORE.
Right. That sounds ideal to me. And the specific use case I have in mind is essentially as the commission part of the, well, some people call it commissioning tool. We're calling it the pledge agent in the Brewski async enroll process. And so part of this would actually be, this is how I get that device onboarded for the rest of its network stack. Given that BLE has some proximal, you get a little bit of proximity. You can't attack it from too far away, but stuff like that.
In theory, yes. I mean, there is the possibility that you do use the additional modes, which would then probably fall back to NFC for the proximity-based Bluetooth Bluetooth initialization. So you kind of would go through another step. That might be a way to avoid the Bluetooth range here, but yeah, either way should work.
Well, so then the question is, why not? Could we just run CoAP over NFC at that point?
Yes, we can, and in fact, that was my original plan, to run CoAP over 6LoW over NFC, which is specified. But this brings me into the same situation. On Apple phones, I have no access to NFC at all. On Android phones, I do have access, but it's limited as well. And from the browser, I have no way out at all. So,
so you would let the operating system do the NFC setup for Bluetooth, and then use GAT to talk to something, and then, in my case, I would say, "Oh, that's great. Now we can build a network of the devices elsewhere."
Yeah.
I have 2 comments. So on the browser, basically on Chrome, you have tested it and it works. Safari, I guess it doesn't, and also you're waiting for Mozilla, right?
So the thing with Mozilla, and I think I had it on the slides, but I didn't talk about it. So yes, first Chrome. Yes, I tested it on Chrome, both Chromium, both from Linux and from Android. Safari, I don't have access to. But the thing is, with Mozilla, they evaluated they found a position for CoAP over, for browser access to GAT, and their position is that it's not secure, which is understandable. So I won't go into the full background, but the thing is, the Bluetooth device doesn't specifically ask to be contacted by a browser, so they don't want to open us up into another cross-origin situation now, even with different protocols. There is a suggestion of how to do it better from Mozilla, especially Ecker and Martin Thompson, whom I want to get back on this basically after we've talked about this here. That would probably wind up with something like WebRTC data channels over GATT, and then we could hook into that. So if that becomes a thing, that would be great, because it would mean that it's accessible from Mozilla devices as well. But this would probably look a lot different, at least on the wire, and we'll have to see whether this can be something that supersedes what I'm doing here right now, or that would be an augmentation. This is still to be seen. Yeah. Right now, the only proposals that are a few comments on GitHub.
Sorry to interrupt. Time is really running out. We have one more slot to cover.
Thanks for your comments.
Yes.
And I'm always available on email, of course.
Yes. Personally, I think, by the way, that this is great that we are at least taking a position on this, because I have read so many theses and papers and work done by others on this topic, and it's nice to have somewhere where we can point them to. So an experimental draft would be perfect, I think. So, thank you, Christian. Moving on to the next presentation. Is it this one?
Yep. Okay. I will take it quick so we have time to look at Christian's graphs also, which are very nice. Next slide.
Just a second, sorry. There you go.
Okay, yeah. So CFRG is working on equations to calculate AD limits, and the equations for CCM8 is quite limiting. You can see them here. What they are based on is that you choose a probability and the length of your messages, typically a maximum length, and then you get limits for the number of packets to encrypt and the number of failed decryptions. And it's worth noticing that these equations are not equations, they are inequalities. So basically, if you choose numbers for V and Q, you know that your probability for a forgery attack is lower than some value, but it might be much lower, or it might be close to the bound. We simply don't know. Next slide. And TLS, DTLS, and QUIC has adopted quite strict limits based on these equations for a lot of different ciphers. They are at least a lot stricter than any previous security protocol. And I think that's good for general use, and rekeying is easy, so that's not a problem for general non-constrained use of this protocol, at least. You can see below here that the limits are around 20 package, and for CCM8 in DTLS it must not be used without additional safeguards. I assume the TLS working group will look at additional safeguards, maybe in CTLS, because this is quite limiting. In TLS, it's okay to use because TLS sets V to 1, so it's not a problem to use CCM8 there. And I think this is very good work from CFRG, but in general, I don't think this is not the biggest security problem that implementation have. I have never heard of a practical problem with a 64-bit tag. Next slide. I think distinguishing attacks are very theoretical. It's hard to say if they have any practical implication at all. Forgeries are very, very practical. Somebody gets a forged message to you. I think there's a lot of things that can be discussed for a IoT setting. The probability 2 to the minus 57 for TLS, DTLS, and QUIC is arbitrarily chosen. And I think we can definitely accept a slightly higher forgery probability for constrained IoT. Also, if you are on a constrained radio connection, sending a lot of packages for an attacker is a lot harder than if you are on a gigabit optical connection. Any effects on the system should be, denial of service effect should be compared with other denial of service attacks on the system. Also, messages is much lower, but that may or may not matter actually. And then there are some other solutions that you might or might not look at absolute length, and you might not close the connection. You can still send, for example, error messages saying that please rekey. Next slide. So specific for OSCORE has the number of packets you can encrypt is dependent on the algorithm, but it's always lower than 2 to the power of 40. And currently, I don't think any of the algorithms have lower limits specified. The CCM8 limits based on the CFRG equations will apply long before 2 to the power of 40. And then you need to rekey. We need to set guidelines for this. There's several different ways to rekey listed here, but they all have some overhead. Next slide. Yeah. So general problem, we need to discuss this, I think, in general for a IoT, constrained IoT setting. And as Ben writes on Jabber, there has not been a huge amount of justification for the chosen limits. After this L and P has been chosen, there is some slight trade-off between the limits Q and V. There has been some discussion in Lake already, and TLS, DTLS, QUIC have discussed this in their working groups. I assume TLS working group will discuss this more for CTLS. There's a discussion for Lake. Question is if there are any other protocols use of CCM in IoT, in IETF, where this is relevant. More specific for OSCORE, we think it's needed a new draft that introduce that you need to keep count of Q and V, how many protected packages and failed decryptions. And Q counting is needed on the server. The client already does this. Then when maximum values of these have been decided, or how is that decided, who decides, and how it's communicated. Then we need to specify actions when the limits are reached, which is rekeying, could also be sending error messages to rekey. And then implementation guidance, for example, when you have a reboot. Similar things are needed also for group OSCORE. Group OSCORE, it's a little bit more complicated. It might be slightly worse for some reason, or slightly better than two-pair OSCORE for some reason. That's for further study. And this leads to thoughts that we should analyze maybe more lightweight symmetric key rekeying mechanism for OSCORE. It is possible to do something lighter than the current. Question is if it's worth doing that. That's for further study. I think we can go to Christian's slides, or if there's questions, comments on this.
So what we are seeing here is basically kind of a sketch of the numbers we've been getting in here now, and which should help us determine the effect of the effect of those limits. So just to run you through the axis, on the axis going from left to right, we see the length of messages. On the axis coming from within the picture, we see how many messages we can encrypt. On the vertical axis, we see how many messages we may decrypt, after how many failures to decrypt the message we need to leave that key, rekey, stop the connection, whatever. Up until start of the week when I heard of the CFRG document, but practically up until we do something about this, our action space was rather big. We could encrypt up to 2 to the power of 40 messages, provided that key lets us. We could encrypt as long messages as that key would let us on that axis from left to right, and we could tolerate any number of failures. Now, given those assumptions that went in there are not right, we have to strip down the space of what we use in terms of numbers. The lines here indicate red is AES GCM, which has a comparatively long tag and is on the safe side. Cha-cha is independent. The cha-cha numbers are independent of the number of messages we send at all. And the blue and turquoise indicate the limits for AES CCM, and turquoise in say AES CCM 8. Next slide, please. So this is cut from the left and shows the limits that in the full lines, the limits that we have with the current p values, which is that AES CCM after 128-ish messages, depending on how many we decide to send, show is over. So 128 messages practically would mean that we really need a different mechanism, or a cheaper mechanism to rekey, or just do as DTLS does and not use AES CCM 8 at all, because the attacker with just 100 crafted messages could force us into an expensive rekeying. But the rekeying is not so expensive. So if we can justify an altered limit of p, say for the dashed version, p to the power of minus 2 to the power of minus 52, which is admittedly grabbed out of thin air, but there needs to be discussion that I'm not qualified to contribute to on the particular value we need here, then that cap of V can go up to something like 2,000, 4,000 messages, after which the leverage we give an attacker that sends 4,000 messages by doing an additional rekeying is probably negligible. But this needs the discussion of which P we accept. And just one more point from the slide before I hand over to the floor discussion again. It doesn't help if we arbitrarily limit the number of messages we send. So The hard cutoffs here are depending on the values 2 to the power of 23 to 2 to the power of 26. And so if we allow the partial IV number to go all the way up there, then this severely limits the number of failures that we can tolerate. But if we just put it a binary order of magnitude below that, we are already roughly at that plateau limit, so we don't have to reduce the number of encryptable messages. We really have to limit how many we can decrypt and fail to decrypt and still use that context. Thank you.
Okay, Christian, we are now effectively over time. Let's try to keep the discussion quick and to the point. So, Benjamin, Carsten, Jordan, please go to the microphone. If not, maybe the Java scribe can relay the opinion.
Yes, Ben was mostly mentioning about perhaps if you only send it once and then close the connection, it is close enough. So that was related to connection closing early in John's presentation. And otherwise, there's no explicit rationale on coming to the bounds for TLS for what it's worth. More came as background information from Carsten. But please chime in on the mic. We should have a few minutes more before the session closes.
And also for minute takers, please copy paste the long chat comments.
Most is there already.
Yeah.
No problem.
Seems to be no. But main conclusion is that there will be a draft to the before next IETF.
Maybe we can devote an entire interim to a view from the core world on the crypto world, because things have changed since we made the decisions some 7 or 8 years ago, what went into 7252. And maybe it's just a good idea to open this up a little bit more, look at that Keccak-related things, look at new modes, and so on, and just see, is there anything that is getting ready for being picked up, or at least we should be starting to do experiments on.
I guess if you can allow larger tags, you get much nicer limits. Just keeping CCM and switching to 128-bit tags.
Göran here, I have a little comment there. I think while we should look at what's coming next, we also need to handle what we have in terms of hardware support and existing devices. I think we need to run with CCM8 for a while, and that's basically what one of these activities can address. Okay, you're not disagreeing with that, Carsten. Great. So just could you go to the last slide of John's presentation? Just quickly say a few words. As I see, these are 4 activities here. The first paragraph, second paragraph, and the next to last and last statements are 4 different activities. And for the first activity, I wondered, that I think is not, we need to get beyond core there. What people or what IoT deployments are, what companies are working with IoT and see a need to use CCM8? And how do we handle these new restrictions on CCM? I think that needs to be addressed by a wide audience. For the second paragraph, I think that's a new draft where there's already material in this and this presentation we could work on. The group of core people need to look at that and adapt it. And for the last one, that's basically if there is sufficient support and interest to work on a lightweight secret rekeying mechanism. I think that we should do that. But that sort of, it's based on interest from the community, I think. That could be something which is either done in Lake or in core, sort of somewhere in between.
Good point.
Thanks.
Okay, last few comments. Please join the queue. We are already over time, and we will be shut down any minute now. Matt, please go ahead.
Talked about the specific groups that need to provide feedback and requirements. Do you have any in mind?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, I think, I mean, everyone that I mean, this is industry consortia. These are different areas in the IETF that needs to use CCM8. Basically, that's a good starting point. How do we continue using CCM8 for the time until we have some alternative? And
right, but what specific industries are using it? And like, you know, I work in the smart grid industry. How does it affect me? That's what I'm trying to understand with this presentation and the risk factor.
I think there's no new attacks. This is just increasing the security bounds to make it really sure that there is no potential attacks. So it's not like somebody has come up with some new attacks on CCM8.
From the Jabber, Michael Richardson is asking, Matt, are you using CCM8 maybe for 802.15.4 or for application data? So it's a question directly to Matt, if he knows.
Okay. I mean, for co-op for co-op security, this is the mandatory to implement algorithm, right? So that's what, when you're using co-op with the mandatory to implement algorithm, you would use CCM8.
Okay, it sounds like let's close it now because we're already beyond the time. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the discussion. I guess this is material for yet another interim, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, sounds good.
We should maybe have it at some point shortly. So thank you all for attending CORE. Thank you for the time. Thank you especially for those in the US because it's pretty late for you. And for the rest of us in Europe, have a nice Friday. And those in Asia, I don't know what time is it there, but probably you still have some time ahead. Thank you also to the minute takers, by the way. Thank you so much. And see you again in the interims.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. See you. Bye.
See you soon.